Echoes of Stillness. Chapter 1. The Ripple. Kazuki, a middle-aged calligrapher in Tokyo, had always lived a life of quiet precision. His days were measured in brushstrokes, his evenings in contemplation. But a single, seemingly trivial moment, a knock on the door from a stranger, began to unravel the stillness he so carefully preserved. The stranger introduced himself as Masato, an old acquaintance whose face Kazuki struggled to recall. Masato bore a peculiar message. Your silence holds an answer you haven't sought. Kazuki's
A
world,
single, seemingly
rooted in
trivial
routine and
moment,
solitude,
a
began to
knock on the
ripple.
door from a
He hadn't
stranger,
spoken to his
began
estranged
to
family
unravel
in
the
years,
stillness he
nor
so
to the
carefully
neighbors who often
preserved.
greeted him.
The stranger
Masato's words
introduced
stirred
himself
something
as
in him,
Masato,
and
an
that
old
night, the
acquaintance
silence
whose
of his
face Kazuki
apartment
struggled
felt
to
louder than
recall.
ever.
Masato bore a peculiar message.
Chapter 2. A
Your
whisper in the
silence holds
noise.
an answer you haven't
Masato's
sought.
visit left Kazuki restless.
Kazuki's
The
single,
next
seemingly
day, he
trivial
ventured into a
moment,
bustling
a knock on the
marketplace,
door from a
a place he had
stranger,
avoided for
began
years.
to unravel
The cacophony of voices, the jostling of bodies, the vibrancy of life,
the stillness
it
he so
overwhelmed
carefully
him.
preserved.
Yet,
The
within the
stranger
chaos,
introduced
Kazuki
himself as
noticed fleeting
Masato,
moments of
an
quiet.
old acquaintance whose face
A
Kazuki
child
struggled
pulling
to
their parents'
recall.
hand, a bird perched on a wire
Masato
above
bore
the
a
clamor.
peculiar
He
message.
met Aya,
Your
a
silence
flower
holds
seller
an
with a
answer.
serene demeanor. She handed him a small bonsai tree and said, "Sometimes life speaks through what we don't hear." Intrigued, Kazuki purchased the tree and found himself returning to her stall each week, not for flowers, but for conversations that barely needed words. Chapter 3. The Weight of Words. Not to send, but to process his thoughts. This one was softer, acknowledging his father's struggles and his own. As he wrote, he felt a strange lightness, as though releasing a burden he carried. The harbor, Aya invited Kazuki to a quiet harbor at the edge of the city, where fishing boats swayed gently on the tide. The salty air carried a sense of renewal, and the rhythmic sound of waves soothed his restless mind. Aya asked him to watch the water carefully. The surface seems calm, she said, but underneath there's a world of movement and life. Silence is like that. It hides depth. Kazuki pondered her words. He realized his silence had been a shield, a way to protect himself from pain. But it had also become a prison, isolating him from others. That night, he began practicing a new form of calligraphy, blending traditional strokes with modern abstraction, a visual echo of stillness and movement. Chapter 6. The Echo of the Past. Masato returned unexpectedly, revealing more about their shared past. They had been classmates, and Masato recalled an incident where Kazuki had stood up for a bullied student. "You didn't say much back then either," Masato said, "but your actions were loud." This memory startled Kazuki. He had forgotten that moment, but it now seemed pivotal. His silence had not always been a withdrawal. Sometimes it had been a space for action, for understanding. Chapter 7. Conversations Unspoken. Kazuki started reconnecting with his estranged sister Mayumi through handwritten letters. Their exchanges were tentative but meaningful, filled with unspoken apologies and shared memories. Mayumi's responses were sparse but warm, hinting at a willingness to rebuild their bond. One day, she visited him, bringing along a photograph of their parents' home. It had aged, but the garden their mother tended was still vibrant. "They would have loved to see you like this," Mayumi said, admiring Kazuki's calligraphy, now displayed in galleries. Chapter 8. The Resonance. Kazuki's art began gaining recognition for its depth and emotion. Critics remarked on its unique blend of traditional and modern techniques, calling it a dialogue between the past and present, spoken in silence. Aya encouraged him to host a workshop. Initially hesitant, Kazuki agreed. Teaching others reminded him of the joy in sharing, not just techniques, but stories, experiences, and the spaces in between words. Chapter 9. The Voice Within. Kazuki finally visited his parents' old home, now abandoned. Sitting in the garden, he felt their presence, not as ghosts, but as memories etched in every stone and flower. He thanked them aloud, his voice steady, his heart unburdened. He planted the bonsai tree Aya had given him, a symbol of his journey. As he placed it in the soil, he whispered, "Silence doesn't mean absence. It means listening." Chapter 10. Echoes of Stillness. Years later, Kazuki's works adorned museums, but he remained humble, living in the same small apartment. Aya had become a close friend, and Mayumi visited often. His life was no longer defined by silence, but by its echoes. Acts of kindness, moments of reflection, and connections rekindled. In his final masterpiece, he wrote a single word in bold, flowing strokes, ko.